Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been doing this show every weekend since 2005. So I really appreciate all of you joining us this weekend to talk about the many issues that are making headlines in Mexico. And I would say sometimes around the world. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, making headlines in Mexico, big headlines, was the first week of the trial of the former Secretary of Public Security, Genaro Garcia Luna, joining us to give us his analysis, his sense as to what this first week meant, not only for the prosecution, not only for the defense of Genaro Garcia Luna, but also for Mexico in the terms of, being the information that was made public during this trial. I really appreciate today's guest. You know him well. He's been joining us throughout the years, Alejandro. He is an expert on public security, national security, and I really appreciate you joining us today, Alejandro. 1 week since this since this trial began, what's your initial reactions of what happened this week? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ana Maria. Always glad to be with you in this broadcast. Well, I mean, there are a number of issues that I think should be highlighted around this trial. One is what the prosecution is apparently trying to do is pin responsibility on Genaro Garcia Luna for trafficking of cocaine to the U.S. In the earlier part of the century. And he's trying to highlight his connection with the Sinaloa cartel by means of testimony from alleged criminals, from protected witnesses, from collaborating witnesses. That is the strategy. They're apparently going to focus much more on testimony, on testimony from these individuals than from any material evidence. Meanwhile, the defense is focusing on the opposite. They are claiming that there is nothing but this spiteful testimony from these individuals that were actually, some of which were actually captured and extradited to the U.S. by Genaro Garcia Luna, and that this is some form of revenge. So I think that the crucial issue going forward is the credibility of these witnesses. And this first week we had 7 witnesses take the stand. One was probably the flamboyant, the most significant, made the most significant contribution to knowledge about the trial and the alleged responsibility of Genaro Garcia Luna was this guy known as Sergio Villarreal, aka El Grande, who was a hitman for the Beltrán Leiva organization at the beginning of the century, and who claimed that Genaro had a long, intense relationship with the Beltrán Leivas, particularly Arturo Beltrán Leiva, and that he received a constant flow of bribes in exchange for information and protection. Some of the details were probably embellishments of how this sort of transactions actually happened. He claimed that even at one point, Genaro Garcia Luna was kidnapped by the drug gang while being Minister of Public Safety. They also claimed that they exchanged 20 tons of cocaine for powder, for white powder. Whether that is true or not, it's hard to say. But it's clear that he didn't provide anything beyond his word. It's important to know that this guy has a long history of this is not the first time that he has become a cooperating witness in a criminal trial. In 2012, I'm sorry, he was actually a protected witness in Mexico in the trial.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
In the trial against against 5 generals, including Tomás Ángeles.
That's interesting.
So it is that particular case ended up collapsing because the testimony provided by Sergio Villarreal was simply not enough to.
Well, yeah. Well, just to remind our audience again, that case, I'd forgotten about that case and how it was linked to El Grande. It was a very interesting case where they arrested high level. He was retired already, General Ángeles de Aguajare, and he was accused. I mean, there was several accusations that never really, and very strange accusations, including, I believe, selling drugs in the military academy. I mean, but there was it was clearly not a case that that had any support. And there was this week, I don't know if you saw it, there was in one newspaper was published that family members of Ángeles de Aguajare have been quoted saying that General Ángeles de Aguajare had tried to warn President Felipe Calderón that Genaro Garcia Luna had links to organized crime. So I'm just kind of bringing that up because it's interesting how these witnesses have their own history that perhaps we don't put into context to understand what this trial is all about. So that's a very interesting detail. But he did provide kind of just outrageous a kind of panorama or picture of drug trafficking in Mexico. And I don't, how much of that do you think was real and how much of it do you think he embellished?
Hard to say. It's very hard to say. I mean, I think it is pretty certain that indeed there were bribes flowing into the security force, Mexican security force, during those years, and that those security forces did provide some measure of protection to this drug gangs. I think that is for sure. The details of actually bribing the head of the then federal investigation agency, Genaro Garcia Luna, and most of his underlings. I mean,
it's to be seen.
It's still to be seen. Again, there is no evidence beyond his word. But yeah, I mean, the broad picture of corruption in the Mexican security forces, not only in civilian forces but also in the military. I think it's not inaccurate.
It's not surprising, yeah.
It's not that did happen. I mean, that type of transaction did happen. At which level, which individuals participated, under which terms, and during what time period? Again, that is something we'll end up probably knowing more about during the trial. But my guess that El Grande had an incentive to embellish the story.
Yeah. Well, what's also been interesting this week is how the president during his press conference has used this trial. I mean, he's trying to make it, he's encouraging people to follow the trial. And of course, there's a lot of press interest and Mexican press interest. And I would say even in the US interest in this trial on the details, because there is this expectation that the witnesses are going to provide information against high level or other high level former Mexican official. And I don't know, maybe even current Mexican officials. What is your expectations of what could potentially come out?
My guess is going to be, it might end up being somewhat anti-climatic in terms of its political impact.
Yeah.
The notion that a whole range of officials, up and including former presidents, I think those expectations will be dashed. I don't think any of the witnesses will. I mean, the prosecution doesn't need that. Yeah, it might actually detract from their case.
Yeah.
If they claim that this was tolerated or even ordered by someone else.
Mhm.
It might
They-
detract. It might detract from the personal responsibility of Genaro Garcia Luna.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a sense that an incentive from the prosecution to do that. I don't think there's an incentive from the defense to do that, because that would be akin to accepting that that what they're saying about the bribes did happen.
Mhm.
So and the notion, and then the expectation that Garcia Luna might take the stand, well, that may or may not happen, but my guess that he will be not very cooperative on those type of questions while on the stand. So my guess is that even if he's proven guilty,
Mhm.
even if he's declared guilty of on all counts, that the political fallout from this is probably not as big as as some hope, particularly the President Lopez Obrador. It's
it was funny because he linked their, the opposition or parties of the opposition or representatives of the opposition are calling for a march to protest against these reforms in the electoral system, including reforms that would impact the national electoral system. And he said that these marches, whoever is marching that day, I think it's the 23rd of February, basically are marching in favor of protecting Genaro Garcia Luna. So, I mean, it was the whole, the whole way.
Yeah, he's trying to link that. I'm not sure how successful he's going to be in that regard. I think whatever political hit, political cost for Calderon or for some members of his administration, I mean, they're already, priced in.
Yeah,
I think that right now the downside risks are probably more on the president has more downside risk than upside risk. Say that this likely to, this is not likely to happen, but say that Genaro is declared not as that the verdict of the jury is not guilty.
Yeah.
Or if there's a hung jury and there's a mistrial.
Right. Which could, the hung jury is a possibility depending on what, happens with the next witnesses and how credible the defense or whatever defense the prosecution can present. It's still, I think there's still a question mark. I'm not 100% sure he's going to be convicted.
I think the odds are still against Garcia Luna, but probably not overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
One
last
might
comment.
Still win it.
Yeah. One last question. I wanted to hear your opinion about what of evidence that will not be introduced in the trial, and which I think is very interesting. The judge has not allowed any. They're not going to allow to introduce any evidence regarding Garcia Luna's lavish lifestyle that the attorney, I think the prosecutor wanted to present, that he was living way beyond his means when he was in the United States. Yeah, so he's not being accused of money laundering, which I think is fascinating, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's right now the strategy of the prosecutors in New York are working at loggerheads at what the Mexican government is trying to do. The Mexican government is actually is trying through the means of a civil suit, the civil trial, to claw back some of the fortune of Genaro Garcia Luna, but claiming it is the result of basically a procurement. Old style corruption.
Right. Not to do with drug trafficking. It's just
happening after 2012, after he left office. So I think one of the big challenges for the prosecution in New York is trying. I mean, they have to say, where's the money?
Right. Right.
So
And
if you say that he's taking tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes, where is it? And that's going to be a challenge. And of course, the decision by the judge to prevent the prosecution from introducing evidence regarding how his lifestyle and his wealth obtained up to 2012 is going to impact. I think it's going to be a significant hurdle for the prosecution. Whether that's enough for Garcia Luna, I don't think so, but it certainly was a tactical win for the defense.
Yeah, no, it's very, very, very interesting. Well, we're going to continue following this trial. Apparently, we're talking about this trial lasting at least 8 weeks, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But clearly, I hope we can have the opportunity to speak to you again as more information comes out next week in this trial of the decade. I don't know if it's a trial of the century, but it's a very important trial for Mexico. Just because it provides us a lot of information in terms of how trafficking or drug trafficking in Mexico took place a couple of years ago. Maybe it's not the same right now, but at least it gives you a sense how bad it was, because it seems to have been publicly. Now we can see how tremendous it was. Thanks so much, Alejandro. Thanks so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico. Can you give us your Twitter account? Because I know that that's kind of the best way to follow you.
At ahope71.
So ahope71.
And you can read my op-ed articles at El Universal on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Oh, I highly